Hi again. My name is Captain Peter Cutsey, and the briefing today is wind shear, both reactive and predictive. The objective, let's have a look at it here, is to recognize indications of wind shear recovery procedures. So that's the objective in today's briefing. A little general information. Wind shear encounters near the ground are the most threatening because there is very little time or altitude to respond to and recover from an encounter. The wind component is mostly horizontal below 500 feet. Horizontal wind shear may improve or degrade vertical flight path performance. Wind shear that improves the performance is first indicated on the flight deck by an increasing airspeed. This type of wind shear may be a precursor of a shear that decreases airspeed and degrades vertical flight path performance. The airspeed decreases if tailwind increases faster than the aircraft is accelerating. Airspeed decreases if headwind increases faster than the aircraft is accelerating. If the airspeed decreases, the aircraft normally tends to pitch down to maintain or regain the in-trim speed. The magnitude of pitch change is a function of the encountered airspeed change. If the pilot attempts to regain lost airspeed by lowering the nose, the combination of decreasing airspeed and decreasing pitch attitude produces a high rate of descent. So you've got to be very careful in doing something like this last comment. So it's important that you actually recognize wind shear. You have to know how to recognize wind shear. And it's not just the oral alert wind shear with the indication on the PFD. Let's have a look at ways to recognize. So the following are indications that the airplane is in wind shear. Wind shear warning, two-tone siren followed by wind shear, wind shear, wind shear, or an unacceptable flight path deviation. Now, unacceptable flight path deviations are recognized as uncontrolled changes from normal steady state flight conditions below 1,000 feet above ground level in excess any of the following. First three are easy to remember because they all have fives in them. 15 knots indicated airspeed, or 500 foot per minute vertical speed change, or a change of 5 degrees of pitch or more, or 1 dot displacement from the glide slope. And this last one is very important. Unusual thrust lever position for a significant period of time. Let's say, for instance, your airspeed is decreasing, yet the thrust levers, of course, with auto throttles engaged, come back to the idle position and stay there as the airspeed is increasing. That's unusual. If the airspeed's decreasing, it is normal and usual for the thrust levers to advance, to maintain. So in my experience over 60 years of flying, I never received a wind shear. I often received these conditions here, or one or two, or a combination of these 5 items that we've just talked about. So don't wait for a wind shear warning before executing the wind shear escape maneuver. Considerations: weather forecasts, ATIS, thunderstorms, predictive wind shear, aircraft radar, avoidance techniques. Really, you don't know when you're going to actually encounter an actual case of wind shear, but you can ready yourself by looking at different items that probabilities would be high that you would receive wind shear. So it's important that you're familiar with those items so that you can get ready. Let's have a look at wind shear during takeoff. Now, in this case here, we're going to look at predictive wind shear, which predictive means forecasting wind shear, and it happens very shortly after you touch toga as you begin your takeoff roll, within a very few seconds after, 10 to 15 seconds or 12 seconds after, you will get this predictive wind shear, in which, of course, you will reject the takeoff. Remember, you reject the takeoff if you have any indication of the following: an engine failure, any fire, predictive wind shear, or aircraft unsafe to fly. We covered all of these in a specific video for rejected takeoff. So there's the predictive wind shear. So that would actually necessitate an RTO. All right. So warning: predictive wind shear ahead, wind shear ahead. Before V1, as I just mentioned, reject the takeoff. After V1, perform the wind shear escape maneuver. We'll go through that after we look at a few more items. Wind shear encountered during takeoff roll. If wind shear is encountered before V1, there may not be sufficient runway remaining to stop if an RTO is initiated at V1. At VR, rotate at normal rate towards 15 degrees of pitch attitude. Once airborne, perform the wind shear escape maneuver, which we'll look at soon. If wind shear is encountered near the normal rotation speed and the airspeed suddenly decreases, there may not be sufficient runway left to accelerate back to the normal takeoff speed. So if there is insufficient runway remaining to stop, initiate a normal rotation at least 2,000 feet before the end of the runway, even if the airspeed is low. Higher than normal attitudes may be needed to lift off in the remaining runway. Ensure maximum thrust is set. Predictive wind shear during the approach. So you will get a message: go around, wind shear ahead, oral. Be very careful not to perform the go around procedure. You're to perform the wind shear escape maneuver, and the verbal call would be wind shear, and the pilot flying would carry out the wind shear escape maneuver, which is not a go around. Most important, and so many times in the sim, when pilots encountered what they thought was wind shear and was wind shear, they called for a go around. No, do not go around. Call wind shear and follow the wind shear escape maneuver. Now, on the go around, we'll discuss it later, you would do the wind shear escape maneuver first, and once clear of the wind shear, then and only then would you perform the go-around procedure. Remember, the go-around procedure involves a change in aircraft configuration. You do not change aircraft configuration in the wind shear maneuver. So there's a distinct difference. So please be careful with that. Down here it says perform the wind shear escape maneuver, and then I grade this out, or at the pilot's discretion, perform a normal go-around. I've graded out for the reasons I just told you. This information is all comes directly out of the Boeing manuals, QRH and FCOM. Those aren't my words, but I would be very, very careful in not performing a normal go-around. Pilot's discretion. Take my word for it. The experience has shown me that stick with one procedure so you're not confused. Wind shear encountered in flight, perform the wind shear escape maneuver. So this is very important. All right, let's go back and have a look at some key techniques. In critical low altitude situations, trade airspeed for altitude if possible. An increase in pitch attitude, even though airspeed may be decreasing, increases the lifting forces and improves the flight path angle. And remember what flight path angle is. I've done a couple of videos on that. Very important. PLI, there's a sound and there's what you would see. And as we'll see in the wind shear maneuver, we could actually have to go to the PLI on and off just the way we've experienced here. Avoid large thrust reductions or trim changes. Cross-check flight director commands using vertical flight path displays. Remember, the command bars give you wind shear guidance. And if you thought that they weren't, for whatever reason, you would pitch up to 15 degrees or PLI. And that's part of the FCOM 2 reference, where it refers to if the rate of descent descends below, decreases below 600 feet per minute rate of climb, you will disregard the command bars and pitch up to 15 degrees or the PLI if required to the shaker. That's important. That's an FCOM 2. The pilot monitoring should call out any deviation from normal. So this is just a quick review of what I've just said. Airspeed changes. Here we are with the autopilot engaged. We're commanded at 150 knots. That's what we've got set. And the airspeed has increased to 167 knots. That is a key. Remember, that's one of the items that we discussed. 15 knot change in speed or more. And there may be further airspeed changes, as we just saw there. And that could happen as you're flying into a downdraft, as we saw there. This is what you'd actually get if your aircraft is equipped with it, as far as a wind shear ahead, predictive wind shear. All right. Just to let you know, we'll go to the look at the QRH. And we've already seen this, so I just wanted to show you that all the information I'm giving you is directly from the QRH. And manual flight, and it mentions auto flight, and I didn't highlight it for an obvious reason. The obvious reason is it's very difficult for me, and I've been at this for many years, to decide whether severe wind shear, whether I'm in severe wind shear or just wind shear, especially if you don't encounter it often. And in my 60 years involved in flying, I only encountered it 2 or 3 times, and it was very difficult to decide whether it was severe, moderate, or whatever. So that is why I recommend, I'm not saying Boeing is wrong in putting this in the manual. I'm just saying that if you're in auto flight, go to manual flight. And you'll see this reflected in what I'll show you here in a second. All right, here's the wind shear escape maneuver. Disengage the autopilot. Push either toga switch and aggressively apply maximum thrust. at which point you're going to disengage the auto throttles. Now, something that's not mentioned here, because it's not part of the procedure in the QRH, is to put both hands on the control column. Too often in the simulator, I observe pilots doing exactly what they should, disengaging the autopilot, pushing the toga switch, aggressively applying maximum thrust, disconnecting or disengaging the auto throttle, but then leaving their hands on the thrust lever, and then one hand on the control column. Don't do that. You're not going to have nearly the control that you should have. Once the thrust is set and the auto throttle is disengaged, the thrust levers will stay there. The pilot monitoring is going to make sure they're there. So take your hands off once you've accomplished setting the thrust, disengaging the auto throttle, put both hands on the control column, and trust me, that is a secret to flying through WINDSHEAR. You've got much better control of the aircraft with both hands on the control column. Important. Okay, simultaneously roll wings level and rotate towards an initial pitch attitude of 15 degrees. Retract speed brakes if they happen to be extended. Follow flight director commands, guidance if it's available. All right, now remember, the flight director will give you WINDSHEAR guidance. Even if the rate of climb drops below 600 feet per minute, they should still give you proper guidance and command you, guide you to pitch to a greater pitch reference up to 15 degrees. If your rate of climb decreases below 600 feet and you're not getting the guidance that you need and the aircraft is going to descend or about to level off and descend, then disregard the command bars. Go to the cake we talked about before, the raw data, okay, and pitch up to 15 degrees or to the PLI and on and off the shaker as we heard and observed. So that's only if the rate of climb decreases below 600 feet per minute. Where is that? That's buried in the FCOM2. Have a look at it. All right. Do not change the gear or flap configuration until WINDSHEAR is no longer a factor. Monitor vertical speed. That's what I've been talking about. And altitude. Do not attempt to gain lost airspeed until WINDSHEAR is no longer a factor. Pilot monitoring, verify maximum thrust. Verify that all the needed actions have been completed and call out any omissions. Remember, this is not, I say again, it's not a go-around procedure. It's a WINDSHEAR escape procedure. A difference. You've got to train your brain to realize that. These are a few notes with respect to aft control column forces increase as the airspeed decreases. We've seen this already in other videos relating to CFIT. Maximum thrust can be obtained by advancing the thrust levers full forward if the EECs are in the normal mode, if terrain contact is imminent. I mean, you get into WINDSHEAR, you could very, very easily hit the ground if you don't have at least 600 feet per minute. Do not exceed the pitch limit indicator. We talked about it. All right. And this warning is in the QRH. And I'm saying if leaving the autopilot engaged while executing the WINDSHEAR maneuver, then severe wind shear can exceed the performance of the AFDS. Be prepared to disengage the autopilot and auto throttle and flying manually. So what I'm saying is really don't leave the autopilot engaged. Fly the aircraft manually to start with, and it'll be a much safer operation. Trust me. All right, let's go back to that is pretty well what you're going to do. with WINDSHEAR. Now, if you encounter WINDSHEAR on final approach, you would carry out the WINDSHEAR escape maneuver exactly the way we saw it, without changing any configuration. And then once out of the WINDSHEAR, you would call for go around, set go around thrust, the way you saw in my video on go around, and carry out the go around procedure. Second. So it's the WINDSHEAR escape maneuver first, and once out of the WINDSHEAR, it's the go around procedure in order to clean up the airplane. My information's on the bottom of the screen. If you care to have a briefing online by yourself or with your partner, call me, email me, and I'll schedule you. We'll do a briefing prior to your sim briefing, prior to your sim. I upload these briefings into Google Drive into a secure folder for your eyes only, so that you can study before your sim session. Stay professional, stay passionate, and thank you for your attention. See you on the next video.